Here we go, kicking off our 2026 college fantasy football series. I am fired up to get into this, John, because we were getting comments on our rookie profiles. We were getting comments on our, rookie mock drafts. Folks are saying, where's the CFF content? Here it is. We are kicking it off here with our Power 4 ranking series. We like to start with a Power 4 series and then expand to the rest of college football a little bit later in the summer for a couple reasons here. We want to get you prepped. There's a lot of leagues that play Power 4 only. There are the underdog drafts that are Power 4 focused, which is, we do very well in that. We do some live drafts. Me and John did very well in the big contest last year. And of course, all of our viewers and listeners following along. But also, John, we're very excited this year. Last year was the launch of the Scott Fish Bowl Tadpole Bowl. That's Power 4 focus. That is the CFF version of the Scott Fish Bowl. And this year, there is going to be a live Tadpole Bowl draft in Boston where you can come and join both John and myself. We will be drafting live. We would love to see you there. Join us in Boston. I'll put the link in the episode description. There are still spots available. With that being said, John, let's go ahead. Let's get into our rankings here. And we've got the quarterbacks broken up into 6 different tiers. And we're starting here with our veteran floor tiers. All right. These are guys that we now have a bit of an understanding of who they are. Last year, they were all first-year starters. And for each of these guys, we're showing our consensus rankings. And then if you look to the far right of the screen here, you could see where both John and myself have them, so you know where we're a little bit higher on each. CJ Carr, John, he is a rising asset for me. I've got him a little bit higher than you. He comes in at 25 for us. What I like about Carr, 24-6 touchdown interception ratio as a first-year starter, 67% completion, 2,700 yards, but I really like this wide receiver room that's being built around him. They've got Jordan Faison, they've got Jaden Greathouse coming back, and they've got some really nice depth there, adding both the Ohio State guys to the transfer portal. I think he's going to have a lot of options. This is an offense that has pivoted to being more pocket-focused, so that's somebody who I'm really excited about off the bat. But I'm curious, John, your thoughts on both CJ Carr and who jumps out to you out of this group?
My only challenge with CJ Carr, and I do believe in a Power 4 only conference, and Notre Dame is technically independent, but they're always included in the Power 4 if you have not played this level of competition yet, because there's so many Notre Dame fans. The challenge that I have is Notre Dame is going to be so good up front, and I do think they're going to beat a lot of people rather easily. I wonder how much CJ Carr will be throwing the ball late in games, which might cap his upside. So we have him at top 25, but I expect him to go a little higher amongst when people start drafting because of the Notre Dame fandom. Gunnar Stockton is clearly worth speaking about, and I think he's actually an underrated CFF quarterback. Last year, he produced a 24-5 touchdown to interception ratio. He had 462 rushing yards, Matt, and 10 touchdowns. He had 9 games over 20 points, and I was shocked by this, Matt. He had 6 games over 30 points. So Stockton is better than people give him credit for, but I do worry about that Georgia offense and how dominant they'll be in the second half of games. And the quarterback that I'm getting a lot of, but doesn't seem to be getting any interest, is Julian Sayin out of Ohio State. I understand the negatives about him. I don't think he has the greatest arm strength. I think right now I'm starting my Devy research. I think he's a little overrated from an NFL perspective at this point, but he does have room to grow. How I look at him is he's a very nice value. And when you dig deep, he's still a Buckeye in Coach Ryan Day's offense. Matt, last year he had a 32-8 touchdown to interception ratio. He had 3,610 passing yards. And I love this. He had 5 games over 30 points. When you're in giant tournaments, you're looking for ceilings. That's the type of player that I want. And obviously, I like Bear Buckmeyer, the dual threat running back, 527 yards rushing, 11 touchdowns as a freshman. He also passed for over 3,000 yards and he had 15 touchdowns last year. Once again, I looked at the numbers and game by game statistics, Matt. He had 4 games over 30 points. I think there's value here if you're patient at the quarterback position.
All right, on to our next tier here. Guys who we've got a little bit of a proof of concept on. We have some variety in our ranking here, John. At 18, or I'm sorry, at 21, we have Alonzo Barnett out of UCF. I've got him a little bit higher than you. Remember, Barnett was at James Madison the last couple of seasons, but now he's going to be with Scott Frost in that UCF offense. At 20, we've got Keelan Russell out of Alabama. We expect him to be the starting quarterback there. No proof of concept for Keelan Russell himself, but certainly a proof of concept for the starting quarterback in the Kalen DeBoer offense. We've got JKS, who had an awesome freshman season. I expect him to take a little bit more of a step forward than John here in our rankings. And we are dead even on Dante Moore out of Oregon. I think we like him. We don't love him as much as the big name might suggest. So, John, out of these guys here, who's jumping out to you in particular?
One player that I find fascinating is Alonzo Barnett. Now, he's been a little bit dinged up in the the spring season for the UCF Knights. So we haven't got a lot of positive reports out of him, but he's been very good before he transferred to UCF this year. At James Madison in the last 2 seasons, he had a 49-12 touchdown to interception ratio. Matt, I like that a real lot. He passed for over 2,500 yards each campaign. He had over 1,000 rushing yards and 22 touchdowns on the ground. And he had 6 games over 30 fantasy points last year. Alonzo Barnett is coming at a reasonable ADP currently because people are a little bit unsure about what he's going to do this year. So I think you should go get him while he's still of value. One player that I think is clearly of value, but you're looking at upside, Matt, because we don't have a lot of evidence. It is Keelan Russell out of Alabama. He's a dual threat signal caller. He's a sophomore who was a 5-star recruit, and he was the 2024 Gatorade High School Player of the Year. I believe in Kalen DeBoer in this passing game. I do think the Crimson Tide will be better this year throwing the football and offensively. And Keelan Russell, you're looking at his ceiling in this offense and his ADP. I think I've got him. I've had 6 drafts already. I think I've drafted him 3 times because I like his ADP very much. And then you mentioned a player who I really like, and I'm getting a lot of also, JKS. He was a true freshman last year with 13 games played. He had an 18-9 touchdown to interception ratio. My only concern why I don't have him ranked higher, he had 100 and -20 rushing yards, but he did get in the end zone 4 times on the ground. Matt, I don't know if his ceiling is there without the rushing yards, but I do love this young man as a passer.
Yeah, I'm excited. There's a lot that got added to the offense for him, right?
Yes.
So, last year he throws for 3,400 yards with pretty much no support there. This year he gets Ian Strong, the transfer from Rutgers. He's got Chase Hendricks, the transfer from Iowa State. And then you've got running back Adam Muhammad in there as well. There's just a lot more around him. We've got the new coaching staff. I think if we can get those touchdowns up 25, 26, and that's going to really help him take that step forward if he's throwing at that same rate. The big question, you're right, John, is, negative 120 rushing yards, right? You want to see that when you're looking for upside in a quarterback. But I wonder if with a little bit more time, a little bit more support around him, pressure doesn't get to him quite as quickly. On to tier 4 here. I'm calling this discounted upside, right? These are guys who you're going to have to pay for, mid-round type guys, but they come with a ton of upside that kind of balances out, not a totally safe projection here. So at 17, we have Kenning Jennings out of SMU. John's got him a little bit higher than me. Lenora Sellers out of South Carolina. All right, buckle up. We're ready to do this again. 15, Jaden Mayava out of USC. And then at 14, we have Camario Taylor out of Mississippi State. And we've really got very little proof of concept on Camario Taylor, but a lot of upside comes there as well. So this is a group that I think you see these names, you start to get excited, but we don't want folks to get too excited.
I would not be surprised if one of these four players finish in the top 5 in college fantasy football scoring and really help owners win their championships. I really like our tier 4 we have right now. First player, you said buckle up, and I agree with you. It is Lenora Sellers out of South Carolina. Last year, he was going in the top 3 quarterbacks, first round pick, at least early second round. So he's fallen a lot. But if you dig deeper, in his last 3 games last year, Matt, he scored 27.7, 43.1, and 27.4 fantasy points. However, for the season, he had 3 games under 10 fantasy points, which is just a complete disaster. So I understand the trepidation that CFF owners have with Lenora Sellers, but I'm looking at upside with him because they bring in a new offensive coordinator, Kendall Briles, and I think that's going to help this Gamecock offense a ton. Now, if you want consistency at this tier, it has got to be Kevin Jennings of SMU. 9 games last year over 20 fantasy points, 6 games over 30 fantasy points.
That's good.
And in his last 2 seasons, he's thrown for 6,886 passing yards and 49 touchdowns. He also has 409 rushing yards and 9 touchdowns. Matt, I really like the floor and the consistency of Kevin Jennings, and I think he's being overlooked. To me, the home run is Camario Taylor out of Mississippi State. I'm a little bit more bullish because I ranked him a little bit higher on ceiling. Matt, last year, he was great at the end of the season. If you look at the last 5 games of the year when he took over, Camario Taylor scored 19.1, 26.7. Then he had a clunker, 9.6, but he was a freshman, 36.4, and 27.9 fantasy points. He's 6'4" and 230 pounds, Matt. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Cam Newton in some ways. Oh. He had 629 passing yards and a 5-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. I love that for a freshman. And he had 458 rushing yards and 8 touchdowns. Matt, I love to live in this tier, our discounted upside.
Yeah, I think the argument for Camario Taylor, you look at the last 2 games of the season. Against Ole Miss, he threw the ball 31 times. He ran the ball 20 times. Against Wake Forest, against Wake Forest in the bowl game, threw the ball 22 times, ran the ball 18 times. The question's going to be, can this Jeff Levy offense finally come through at Mississippi State? How does he hold up with a whole season against an SEC schedule? But you're absolutely right. The upside is there, and that's what this tier is all about. On to the next tier. I think this is kind of the opposite, and we're opening it up a little bit. This is our largest tier here. It's going quarterbacks 8 through 13. And these are known commodities. John, these are guys that we've got a bit more of a sample size on, and we could be a little bit more confident in what they're going to do. So at 13, we have Avery Johnson, Kansas State. One of these guys that you're like, he's still got eligibility. 12, Damon Williams out of Washington, who is still at Washington despite his offseason transfer portal escapades. At 11, we have Darian Mensah, who was at Duke last year. He's on to Miami this year. Josh Hoover at 10, formerly of TCU. Now he's at Indiana. At 9, we have Byram Brown, who follows head coach Alex Golish from USF to Auburn. And then we've got Connor Weigman, Houston, who had a really good redemption season in 2025.
The 2 players I really want to talk about in this tier, I like Damon Williams a ton out of Washington. He's the ultimate dual threat playmaker that we seek in college fantasy football, Matt. He averaged, and I was surprised. I knew he was good. I didn't realize he was this good. He averaged 28.5 fantasy points last year. He had over 3,000 passing yards and 25 touchdowns in the year. But more importantly, Matt, he added 611 rushing yards and 6 touchdowns. What I like about him, Jed Fish begins his third year in control of the Huskies at Washington. And Damon Williams has been there the whole 3 seasons. So he really knows this offense. We don't have a lot of turnover. And that is provides a very nice ceiling from a college fantasy football standpoint. And the other player, I'm just betting on the coach and the system, Matt. I'm all in. I drafted this young man in 5 of my 6 leagues already. It is Josh Hoover of Indiana. I don't understand why he's falling, Matt. I'm absolutely blown away at the ADP value of this young man. Look at what Cignetti has done in about the last 5 years. Jordan McLeod, Todd Santiro, Curtis Rourke, and Fernando Mendoza were all unbelievable fantasy assets. I think Josh Hoover is easily as good as the first 3. I can't say he's Fernando Mendoza. He just went number 1 in the NFL draft, won the Heisman Trophy. But he's clearly as good as the others. He's played at TCU, and he passed for over 3,400 yards each of the past 2 seasons. He's had 56 touchdowns in the air and 6 rushing touchdowns in that time span, Matt. And he averaged 26.3 and 27.1 fantasy points. If he is able to just increase that by 3 points per game with Cignetti, Matt, you're looking at a 30 fantasy point per game average. I'm all in on Josh Hoover. The one player that I have a little bit of concern about is Byron Brown out of Auburn. There's been some bad reports over spring about Byron Brown, but I can't discount how amazing he was at USF the last 3 seasons. He averaged 33.9 fantasy points 3 years ago. Then he had the clunker because of injuries, 14.1. But last year he bounced back at 39.9 fantasy points per game. I still believe that he's going to be fine. He follows his coach, Golish, over to Auburn. I think he's going to be fine despite the negative reports. But at this tier, it's perfectly labeled known commodities of fantasy success.
Yeah, 2 guys that I really want to key in from my perspective here. Darian Mensah, I'm excited about him. I think as the offseason goes on, we could be looking, I could have him closer to 5 than 10. I think this is a guy I could really talk myself into. And by the way, I should have mentioned this earlier than minute 19, but we are going to this week, our full CFF rankings, Power 4 and beyond, will be available over at patreon.com/rookiebigboard. So that link will be in the episode description, and you will want to head on over there to see those updates all off season long. And I say that for Darian Mensah. At Duke last year, John, he threw the ball 500 times. He threw for 34 touchdowns, just 6 interceptions. He had 132 rushing yards as a freshman, but last year, -32. So the rushing yards didn't come through, despite the fact that he's a pretty mobile guy.
Yes.
If you look the last 2 seasons at Miami, Carson Beck threw the ball 467 times. Cam Ward threw the ball 454 times. This is an offense that wants the quarterback to throw the ball. Mensah's shown that he can do that. But Cam Ward, 204 rushing yards, 4 rushing touchdowns. And even Carson Beck, who, isn't mobile in the slightest, had 2 rushing touchdowns. So I think there's actually a lot of upside for Mensah. And I see in Mensah's game a lot of what we saw with Cam Ward coming out of Washington State. I think in an offense where he'll have more time to operate, settle down, he can be a really dynamic guy. And I just think it's worth mentioning, folks, if you are going to draft Connor Weigman, you just have to be aware that Houston recruited the number one quarterback in college football, the number one incoming freshman quarterback in Keyshawn Henderson, right? The expectation at this point is that Weigman starts. But if Houston starts off, 1-4, John, or
Yeah.
0-5, you're not keeping a 5-star number one overall quarterback who um, chose to stay home at Houston. I mean, it was a huge get. Houston doesn't get the top quarterback in the country to commit, So they're not going to keep this guy on the bench if Weigman is struggling at all. And so it's hard to factor that exactly in the rankings. I don't want to tank him because last season he looked good. There's a lot of continuity. He's that veteran presence. There's nothing at a camp saying Keyshawn Henderson's going to take his job, but I feel like we need to say it. It needs to be like a disclaimer in small print at the bottom of whenever you draft Connor Weigman. All right, our tier 2 here, guys who were taken early, but not often. I'm calling it that tier because, John, in this group, I want some exposure to each of these guys, but I don't want to leave this offseason really heavy on any of them, right? They all come with a certain level of risk. Starting here at 7 with Drew Mestemaker out of Oklahoma State. I've got him a bit higher than John. John has Marcel Reed, our number 6 consensus quarterback, a bit higher than me. Then we get to Sam Leavitt, who is formerly of Arizona State. After a lot of shopping around, he lands at LSU. John Mateer is 4 out of Oklahoma. John's got him a bit higher than me. And I've got Devin Dampier out of Utah a bit higher than John. So not a ton of consensus here between us. And I'm emphasizing that because I think you're going to see that amongst your league mates as well.
And there's actually value here, Matt. I'm going to first talk about 2 players who we are way higher on than the CFF industry in general from a college fantasy standpoint. Sam Leavitt, Matt, I just drafted him in a best ball Power 4 draft, and I got him in round 9 as like the 15th quarterback off the board, Matt. I'm a Lane Kiffin believer. All right. If that's bad, so be it. But I've watched this coach make fantasy gold for the last decade. I'm going to believe him moving over to LSU. He can do the exact same thing with this offense with Sam Leavitt. In 2024, Leavitt scored 25.7 fantasy points per game. He was exceptional 2 years ago for the Sun Devils. Last year, despite playing in only 7 games and then getting injured, he still averaged 26.5 fantasy points per game. I don't think most people realize that Leavitt was actually pretty good last year. He just didn't hit the ceiling that we had hoped for. In the past 2 seasons, he has rushed for 749 yards and 10 touchdowns. He's also passed for 4,513 yards and 34 touchdowns. Matt, I just salivate at what I think Lane Kiffin can do with this talented young man with this Tigers offense. So I really like Leavitt. Get him now, folks. I think his ADP is going to rise. And I also like Devin Dampier. I was wrong on him last year, Matt. But now, you know what? He's just way too good to deny. 2 seasons ago at New Mexico, he was CFF quarterback 2. He moved up to Utah in the Power 4, and I thought maybe he wouldn't play as well. Man, he was CFF quarterback 12 for the Utes last year. He has scored 32.3 and 34.3 fantasy points per game the past 2 seasons. Matt, he's been sensational of a fantasy player. He also impressed me with his passing last year. He was much more efficient throwing the ball. He increased his touchdowns from 12 to 24, and he dropped his interceptions from 12 to 5. That's amazing. Producing those numbers despite moving up in level in competition. And what has he done the last 2 years on the ground? 2,001 rushing yards and 29 rushing touchdowns. Devin Dampier is a fantasy star. And the other player that I don't understand why he's getting enough respect early in the draft season It is Marcel Reed, Texas A&M. Last year, he produced 27.9 fantasy points per game. He threw for 3,169 yards and 25 touchdowns. He also ran for 494 yards and 5 touchdowns. But he had 6 games over 30 fantasy points, and he had 2 over 40. Matt, that's the type of ceiling I like. Marcel Reed should be very good once again, and he's being overlooked in the CFF community in early drafts.
I think it's worth, getting into Drew Mestemaker a little bit here. I think the reason that I'm a little bit higher than most on him is, and John, you mentioned this when talking about Devin Dampierre, there's a reasonable approach when a player goes from the group of 5 to the power 4 that you expect a bit of regression, right?
Yes.
Naturally, you're stepping up a level of competition. I think Drew Mestemaker maybe has the most unique situation ever moving up from the the group of 5 to the power 4. He comes with the same head coach. He comes with the same offensive scheme, the same very good running back, and he doesn't get talked about enough, but he comes with Wyatt Young as well, who is a really reliable wide receiver option for him. He's going from the group of 5 to the Big 12, John, which is as friendly for a quarterback as possible. Last season, he threw for 4,300 yards. It was his first year ever as a starter. Not first year ever as a collegiate starter. First year ever starting as a quarterback. Even in high school, he never started. He threw for 34 touchdowns, 5 rushing touchdowns, not a lot of rushing yards, but 5 rushing touchdowns. The sky is the ceiling. Drew Mestemaker could finish as the quarterback 1 overall, and it wouldn't surprise me. That's not where I've got him ranked, but I'm saying that's within the realm of possibility. But let's get into the guys who are the most likely here to finish as quarterback 1. There's really only 2 players, John, in our consensus top picks tier. And if you're looking to take a quarterback first off the board, it's either Arch Manning out of Texas or it's got to be Trinidad Chambliss out of Ole Miss. We both like Arch Manning at 1, but Chambliss, consensus second choice.
Trinidad Chambliss could be a little thought of differently by different CFF experts because Lane Kiffin has left Mississippi and Trinidad Chambliss is returning. So how much will the offense change this year without Kiffin at the helm? But the coaching staff, there are some members there. Most of the reports indicate they're going to be running a very similar offense. And I just believe in this young man, Matt. I think he's very, very talented. He was arguably the free agent pickup the year off the CFF waiver wire last year at quarterback. He finished as CFF quarterback 8, averaging 26.1 fantasy points per game. He had 3,937 passing yards, 527 rushing yards, and 30 total touchdowns. I really like the Rebels quarterback. He's a dual threat star, and I think he's going to have a very good season this year because I know he wants to increase his draft stock, and it's going to be a very competitive draft in April of 2027. What can we say about Arch Manning? He's not underrated. He's getting the hype, but Matt, I'm starting to believe the hype is worth it. I studied some film of Arch Manning early in the season, and I've looked at games late in the season. I will say this. This young man made a tremendous leap of production and efficiency as the year progressed for the Longhorns. And last year, I think he was better than people are giving him credit for. He finished the year as CFF quarterback 10. He scored 389 fantasy points. That's an average of 29.9 points per game. In 4 of his final 6 games, he produced over 30 fantasy points. And he scored 53 and 48 in that hot stretch. Matt, he was playing excellent football late in the season. And he is a better runner than his uncles Eli and Peyton. He's more like his grandfather, Arch Manning. He had 399 rushing yards and 10 rushing touchdowns. Matt, Arch Manning He's everything you want in a CFF quarterback. He's got the legs, he's got the arm, and Texas has the talent on offense around him. He's deserving of the number one spot.
All right, so there you have it. Our top 25 Power 4 college fantasy football quarterbacks. Again, this is kicking off our series as we work through each position group to help get you ready for those underdog drafts, to help get you ready for those general Power 4 college fantasy football, or just any college fantasy football draft. You know, these guys still apply. And of course, to help you get prepared for this year's Scott Fish Bowl, Tadpole Bowl, including the live draft in Boston that both John and myself will be at. So the link is in the episode description. The entry goes to support some really fantastic charity work, and you get to come draft with us. It's an absolute win-win. We're really excited about it. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel. You can see the entire series go through. And if you want access to our full college fantasy football ranking consensus, each position group, Power 4 and Group of 5, that's going to be available this week over at patreon.com/rookiebigboard. And we're going to be back real soon with some more league-winning college fantasy football advice.